right, I'm going to do the hard task of stopping the wonderful community and connection time. It's always so nice to have that time to make these connections. It's hard to stop it. But I want to make sure we have plenty of time to hear our great presentation tonight and some board announcements. And if possible, at the end of the meeting, we might have time to swing back around, but talk about any announcements any of us members have at the end. But for starters, we always like to kick this off with a reading of our mission statement. And our lovely Ireland traveler, Rebecca, is back. Rebecca, will you read the mission statement for us?
Sure. WIFLA's mission is to provide an inspiring forum for women to explore and advance their creative development, to promote their work in the marketplace, and to infuse the community with their spirit of cooperation and invention.
Wonderful. Thanks. And then next up, we like to say hi to any new members that have joined us. And when I say new members, they're not just members that have joined in the last month, but also maybe members for whom this is their first member meeting. So you may have been a member for a few months, but this might be the first time we're seeing you on this call. Our membership chair, Melissa, is not on the call yet. So I'm going to fumble around. And I know Pam Swallow is new. She's waving. Hi, Pam. I don't know if anyone else on here is new. Anyone can help me out. You can welcome yourself as well.
Thelma, are you new?
We have some visitors.
Yes,
I'm a
We're
visitor.
here to
From
hear.
Nancy's petite group.
Welcome, Thelma. A special guest of Nancy, our presenter. Fabulous. Okay, anyone else?
Oh, everyone just moved around.
Yeah, they did. Okay. So it's funny, Melissa was also going to do a little announcement for Kathy, who is our person. She's our chairperson at large on our board, who's taking care of our great 30th anniversary celebration this year. And many of us are serving on a kind of special subcommittee to support those efforts. And Kathy is quite the project manager, moving us along and making sure everything happens and is done well. And we usually make a little announcement here that anyone who wants to join that subcommittee can jump right in and help us out. We have several different things, craft making, some things that are going to happen at the event. Of course, there's the food, there's opportunities to help with tabling certain things. So if you're interested in getting on that subcommittee, helping volunteer at some level, you could put a message in the chat, or we'll find you. If you would just want to raise your hand and volunteer, we would love to help you get involved. It's going to be a really fun event with lots of little mini events as part of it as well. And I also want to say that we have some fabulous new event sponsors who have donated recently. We have different sponsorship levels for that. And the theme is Pearl, because a 30th anniversary is all about the pearl. And so that's why you may have seen Pearls of WIFLA in the newsletter. And we have different levels of being part of the pearl when you are an event sponsor. So just look out for information about that in the newsletter which Margot runs so well. You'll be able to find any kind of information on that that you want from our newsletter. And with that, I'm going to segue right in over to giving the mic to Margot.
Yes, believe it or not, it's almost time to get the July newsletter together. So if you have any news and you want to toot your horn about some things that are going on with you and your creations and your creativity, don't be shy. Just send them along. You can send an email to our Google Drive, or I'll put my email in the chat. And that's really the fastest way. Be sure to put WIVLA in the subject line.
Fabulous. And then I'm going to put the mic in Marie's hand for a little visual arts update. And you are muted, Marie.
All right, let me get back here. So I am happy to report we have 19 teams. We were shooting for 20, but we're 19
Okay.
is great. The deadline for teams to register and pay their entry fee is July 1st. So there's still time for people to join. And the deadline to upload the visual and literary pieces is August 1st. Then we're looking at September dates. On the 8th, which is a Sunday, we'll have drop off and hanging. The exhibit opens on the 12th of September, and our reception will be on the 20th of September. So I'm really excited to see that 19 teams are participating.
I think we have 20 because somebody's been having a problem. So she'll be getting registering.
Well, there's time for more teams.
Right.
And I think that's all I have now.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marie. And then the mic goes back to Rebecca for any literary arts announcements.
Yes, so the anthology, the short story contest, is in the editing process right now. And October, or first week of October, is going to be the book launch party. Ellen might have more detail about that, together with the Houston Writers Guild Author Palooza Conference.
I do have one small update on that, which is pretty much hot off the press. The Author Palooza Conference is going to take place at Rice University, but the launch night, that Friday night, October 4th, whatever the first Friday is, that is going to take place at Brazos Bookstore. And in addition to finding out, who is in the anthology and hearing a few of the readings, we will also have Deep, Deborah Mouton, who you might remember presented to us sometime back, right after the pandemic. So exciting stuff is coming up. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, now, without further ado, we are a little early and I love when that happens. So I'm going to pitch it over to you, Jean. Are you going to be introducing our presenter?
No, I think Margot is going to be introducing her.
Okay, Margot. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
I'm going to start out with a more formal introduction and then move into a more casual introduction. So after 40 years practicing pediatric critical care, anesthesiology, and pain medicine, and pediatric hospice care, Dr. Nancy Glass retired from clinical practice as Distinguished Emeritus Professor of Pediatrics in 2022. She received her MFA in writing from the Vermont College of Fine Arts in January 2023 and is currently finalizing a collection of pediatric hospice essays. Now, I also want to say that Nancy is multi-talented. She amazes me at all the things she can do. She is a gourmet cook. She is a master gardener. She can ride a tractor and pick up stuff. I mean, how fierce is that? And let's see, what else does she? Oh, and she studies birds. She's an expert on birds. So, I mean, she just blows me away with all of her talents and kindness. And anyway, take it away, Nancy.
All right. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm going to see if I can get this up here. Can you guys see this?
It's coming, I think. There.
Can you see it? Okay, perfect. And can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. All right, well, I appreciate the offer to talk about my writing journey, although I have to say that I've had major imposter syndrome all day because I suspect that there are some much more accomplished writers among your group, but I'm going to do this anyway. And so what I sort of jokingly said to Margot was, I have something to say and I had to learn how to say it. And I'm sticking to that as my topic today. And you'll see bird photos in this presentation. And the ones that don't have a photographer's name on there were taken by me. And I'll tell you the reason for that when I get to it. But let's talk about this. Let's see, and why, there we go. I think it's important for you guys to know that I can't separate my hospice work from my writing because it was the need to tell my hospice stories that got me interested in learning to write. And I just felt absolutely drawn into it. So I'm going to give you a brief primer about the hospice work itself and why it touched me so much. And I'm always asked these three questions, which I'll sort of work into the early part of this presentation before we get to the writing. How and why did you go into hospice medicine? I mean, who picks that, right? Who picks that? And how do you even do this work? It just sounds horrible to be taking care of dying children all day long, every day. And then finally, why do these stories even need to be told? This is such a sad area. So I'm going to try to bring you into that world just a little bit so that you can understand why this was important to me. But to go to the how I got into hospice medicine, I'll start by saying there were three things I would never do when I started medical school: pediatrics, anesthesiology, and psychiatry. And my hospice work was really a mixture of all three of those. My primary training was in pediatrics. Then I did a fellowship in critical care medicine and took care of the sickest kids anywhere. And then I segged into anesthesiology and pain medicine, which I practiced at Texas Children's for about 30 years. And it was the time in the ICU when I sat with the nurses and sat at the bedside that I learned to be comfortable sitting with grief and loss and just listening. And it was hard for me because I'm sort of a yacker, but I had to learn to shut up and listen. And that was very important. So I felt like I had all the skill sets. I didn't really realize it even, but I had all the skill sets necessary for hospice medicine. And then life moved on, and like most of us, I lost both of my parents in my, well, I guess I was in my early 50s when I lost my parents, and both of them were cared for in hospice. So in 2011, I got a flyer in the mail from a hospice that had cared for my parents, and I just assumed that it was because I had made a donation in their names when each of them died to the hospice. And I flipped through it, and flipped to the last page, and a cousin of mine by marriage was the CEO of the hospice. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know Jimmy was doing that. So on one particularly annoying day in the operating room, I called him up and I said, do you by any chance have anything I could do at hospice? Because, this job is getting to me. And he said, Nancy, you couldn't have called at a better time. And their pediatric doctor had just announced her retirement. So I applied and took a bunch of courses and sat for the board certification exam in hospice medicine and began working in hospice in January 2012, all the while continuing my full-time job at Texas Children's. So I saw patients at night and on weekends, and I just fell into it. I felt like it was the purest form of medicine that I had ever practiced, and I just loved it. About a year after I started doing it, I was cleaning my desk off, and I found that folder from the hospice, the sort of a marketing, fundraising thing. And I flipped it over, and it was addressed to my neighbor 2 blocks over that had the same house number as mine. That was not meant for me, but maybe it was. So that's the story of how I added hospice to my other job at the end of my career. And I have to give you just a little bit of background. I promise you I've cut out 30 slides from this at least, but I want to tell you sort of what we did. In the 10.5 years that I worked at hospice, I admitted about 500 children, so about 1 a week in that time period. About a quarter of them were newborn children with bad birth defects or known inherited diseases that were known to have a short lifespan. Overall, about half of the children that I admitted had serious genetic disorders. And that's sort of an important point. Many, many very rare conditions that I cared for. About 40% of the kids had cancers that had not responded to treatment. And then there were some other accidents and incomplete suicides. There were a lot of children that had been living in their homes with long, slow, deteriorating conditions that then suffered some sort of illness, a pneumonia or something happened, and then they became terminally ill at that point. And so I admitted those children. And pediatric hospice is, like adult hospice, very much team-based. I was the team physician. I had several nurses working with me. I had a chaplain and a social worker dedicated to my team. And then I had one very special volunteer who actually was a retired nurse who grew up in Argentina and had worked in the Latino community in Houston for decades. So she was really my link to those patients. She went with me on every initial visit to interpret for me. She knew the right questions she'd ask. And after we had worked together for a while, she would say, do you mind if I tell them such and such? So she would go off on a tangent. She was wonderful. And she would keep up with our patients and she would say, now remember to call your nurse, but if you can't get your nurse and you're scared, call me. So a wonderful resource for my team. Couldn't have done it without her. Pediatric hospice, though, is different from adult hospice. And when adults sign on to hospice, they have to give up all of their prior caregivers. They have to give up their specialists and their cardiologists and all of that. But some genius wrote into the Affordable Care Act that children with terminal conditions can receive active care, disease-directed care, as well as be enrolled in hospice. And that was a genius move because it allows us to get to know the families earlier before they are at true end of life. So that was wonderful for us. The other thing was that I ended up doing a lot of very general pediatric care, especially with the newborns. Parents would come home with their first baby, and I did a lot of talking about feeding and pooping and bathing and keeping them dry and teaching them how to use a thermometer. So a whole lot of very general care. And I would also say that in this death-denying culture that we have, for many of our young parents, this was their first experience with death. So we did a lot of educating and a lot of counseling. And what I wanted to sort of illustrate in this picture is that parents bring a bucket of baggage into the situation. They may have pre-existing marital issues, financial problems, trauma, abuse from long past. Their current situation, everything blows up. The financial problems are going to be worse because one or both parents may lose their jobs. They can have an exacerbation of any pre-existing alcohol or drug issues. And then really the smallest bucket, the easiest thing to do is the child's medical needs. That was easy. I knew how to do that. It was all of the psychosocial stuff that was really the hard part of pediatric hospice care. And I've just put some issues here, but you don't need to concentrate on those. But what I found was that going into people's homes was just an amazing, amazing visit for me. I had never done home visits before, and I was just struck by how different and how special they are. I knew that patients coming to see us in clinic put on their cleanest clothes. They want to be seen as capable, caring, competent parents. They did their best to show up that way. But when we go into their home and we are the visitors, then they really are more likely to show themselves. And for that reason, they're more relaxed, they'll laugh, they'll talk about stuff going on in the neighborhood. It gives us a much better opportunity to assess them for stress, alcohol abuse, any kind of other stressors. And I can't tell you how many times I went into homes and saw that there was no food. In this wealthy city that we have, there was no food. Sometimes there was a small refrigerator, but not even a stove. So I was absolutely shocked by some of the situations that I witnessed. I remember going late one Friday night to a home in the near North Side that had no air conditioning. And at 9 o'clock at night, when I needed to go fix a pain pump, it was 90 degrees at least in the house. It was just stifling. So we don't know about those things. People are embarrassed to talk about those issues. So going in there, I could see much better how they were coping with the illness and what their underlying situation was. One of the things that I found was that if I went into a home and it was neat, that is, care had been taken to maintain some level of neatness, that was a pretty good indicator for me that the mother, at least, had her head kind of in the right place. She was dealing with the stress effectively. If I walked into a home and it was absolutely chaotic, then I had to worry about whether the stress level was really getting to them and how we could pile on some extra support for that family. And I'm going to talk about this for a couple of minutes because it was very important early on in writing these stories. I had to figure out how to tell them without violating HIPAA regulations. I cannot, without asking permission from the parents, I could not use names, etc. So I changed in all of these stories the name, the exact age. The rare diseases I do not name. I just say a very rare disease, very rare genetic disease. I might talk about a brain tumor, but not say where it was or what kind it was. I might say an abdominal tumor. If the child had a bone tumor on the left leg, I might say it was the right shoulder. just to protect the privacy of the patient. I never talked about when we cared for them, when they were admitted or when they died, where they lived, where they were from. And it's interesting that all of my first drafts I write using the real name and the real disease because it helped me get my head into the story itself. I had all of the face sheets, sort of the demographic information, and I would frequently take notes on that sheet for my first physical exam and writing in the family's history and, the standard questions I would ask about, where does dad work and where did you guys meet and all those things. So I kept those records and I could go back to those when I needed to in order to make sure I was being as true as possible to the stories. I'm going to give you an example right now of how I might have dealt with that. I'm going to read you a very short essay called What's in a Name? And it's about a baby I saw who actually had the same name as my aunt. And it's a very old-fashioned name. And I did not expect to see it in a baby whose parentage was from Africa. I did not expect to see that. So I'm just going to read you this and I actually changed the name to another old-fashioned name in my family of a different person. And I think that probably worked here. What's in a name? Names are important. Why our parents give us one name and not another tells us a great deal about their culture and religion, about the naming conventions at the time of our birth, and sometimes the name tells us even more. Throughout my career, I've asked parents about their children's unusual names, how to pronounce it, what it means, what its origin is, whether the name is a family name, etc. But when I began practicing hospice medicine, I asked about the name of every child I saw. It's a quick way to build rapport and demonstrate interest in the child as a unique person. Every parent has a story to tell. Asking about the name gives us insights into the family's culture, background, spirituality, and values. It opens the door for families to share prior losses if they named the child after a dead sibling or other relative. It gives me the chance to learn about important influences in the parents' lives, especially in the case of perinatal hospice, when parents have learned during pregnancy that their baby's life will be short. The name they choose carries all of their hopes and dreams for the baby. The name is how they will remember the baby forever. I went to visit a newborn baby with a lethal condition, living with her parents and 2 active toddler siblings in a small apartment not far from the father's place of employment. Her name was old-fashioned and did not sound African. After introductions and pleasantries, I asked the mother, how did Alice get her name? I've always loved that name. It's the name of my favorite aunt. The mother, a strikingly tall, beautiful Black woman who did not look like she'd just had a baby, smiled and pointed toward her husband. I named her, he said, for the aunt who raised me. I sat with that for a few seconds and waited a little longer. Can you tell me how it came to be that your aunt raised you? He took a deep breath. He told me that when he was a young boy, his village in a Central African country became embroiled in a long-running civil war. One day, soldiers came into the village and began slaughtering everyone they found. His aunt grabbed him, ran into the forest with him, and they escaped the massacre. Everyone else in his family was murdered: his parents, his siblings, his aunts, uncles, and cousins, everyone he knew. His aunt adopted him, raised him, educated him, and helped him get to the United States for more opportunities. Since then, he had completed college and professional training and had secured a good job. He moved to Houston at the urging of a church friend, met his future wife online, and convinced her to come to Texas too. His aunt had died some years before, but he told me he was thrilled when they found out their 3rd child would be a girl, so he could name her in his aunt's honor. What could I say to that? Knowing as I did that the little one would likely die within weeks. Had he not heard what the obstetrician told them about the baby? Did he not believe the dire prognosis that had been explained to them? Alice died at the age of 3 weeks, quietly and gently. Her memory will be forever linked to her father's beloved aunt through the sharing of their name. I don't think her father misunderstood what he had been told at all. I think he simply wanted to honor his aunt's life with this one precious, beloved gift, Alice. The second question that always comes up is, how do you even do this work? And I have a very intentional practice, as I think most people probably do, for getting through tough days. I always imagine these difficult situations as a weight, as a stone that I'm carrying. It's always in my left hand. I don't know why, but I always feel it in my left hand. And I'm always looking for something that I can put into my right hand. I'm looking for something that I can hold, even metaphorically, to balance that sorrow and that weight. I would also do that when I went into homes. If I was in I remember one home I went into and the patient died soon after I got there. And I was waiting for the medical examiners, investigators to arrive. And I heard a cockatoo singing in the kitchen. And it was just that little piece of beauty that helped me balance this incredibly sad situation. I also taught families to do that. Some of them naturally gravitated toward a sense of gratitude for the blessings that they had received along their sad journey. But other people, I felt, could be taught. When you're feeling really heavy, can you think of something to counterbalance that, to bring you back to some sense of peace or beauty? And so that's what I did. And that's the reason that I always put pictures of beautiful things in my presentations. Sometimes it's flowers. This time it's birds. And then finally, why do these stories need to be told? What is it? And I think the primary reason is really, in my sense, to counter our culture's death denial. Children do die. About, 70,000 children a year die in hospice care, and there probably should be more. I think that it's also possible to bear witness to tremendous strength and grace and gratitude. All of the human emotions run through the families that I cared for, all of them. And I think it's possible to shine a light on those. I also wanted to shine a light on people living on the margins of our society. I took care of many, many immigrants, recent immigrants, legal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, people working their tails off to provide for their families. And so I feel like those people who are not always spoken of in the best of terms, that I had an opportunity to shine a light on the universality of the parenting experience and the hopes and fears that those parents had for their children, just like everybody else. And I think that they're unfairly sometimes castigated as being less than, and that was not the experience that I had. I also wanted to illustrate that death could be peaceful and comfortable. And I hope that I was able to achieve that for most of my families. And then finally, some of the stories I tell are about people that you would probably run into going out and about in your life. You might notice that the person picking up the dishes at your table at a Mexican restaurant didn't seem very friendly, but you don't know but what he has a daughter with a brain tumor at home. So I hope that perhaps after reading some of these stories, people will develop a little bit of empathy. And I always felt that my hospice work, and I don't say this in a cavalier way, was really a ringside seat to the human condition. And that's why it was so very touching to me and very important to me. I'm going to read one more story before I talk about the writing part. The story is a little bit longer, but I've taken about 40% of it out. This one was published last year, and it's called Kids Always Know. This is a story about failures. First, about my shortcomings as a pediatric hospice physician to guide parents toward the most peaceful death for their child. My inability to do the one most important job in this tender space. It's also about that rare situation in which well-meaning, loving parents were unable to do their part in preparing their child for death. Our joint failures intersected at a sad, lonely death for sweet Jacob. The responsibility for those failures is mine to shoulder. Jacob was a smart, funny, elementary-age kid, great with Legos. He had 2 doting parents and a younger sister, a close, loving family with a strong faith. They had a huge extended circle of friends and family who provided meals and helped with his little sister and came over to visit and support Mom. Jacob had a malignant tumor in his lower brainstem, the neck part, and upper spine. His parents took turns staying with him during chemotherapy, where Jacob masterfully constructed Lego projects on the days when he felt good. His body tolerated the aggressive treatment well, but his tumor continued to grow. When there were no other treatments he could offer, Jacob's oncologist invited me to attend a meeting with the parents. He introduced me as the hospice physician with whom he had worked for many years and told Jacob's parents that it was now time to consider hospice care. There would be no benefit to further office visits, blood work, scans, or chemo. It was time to focus on Jacob's time at home and on his comfort. After the oncologist set the stage, I asked, "What does Jacob understand about his cancer?" We told him at the beginning the medicine would make the bad cells go away. I counted to 20 in my head. "What will you tell him now?" I pressed. We told him he's going home. The doctor will call us when it's time for chemo again. Over the next few weeks, I'll try to help you find the words to tell him the truth. We'll bring you some books you can read for Jacob and his sister. Meanwhile, I'd encourage you to be open to any questions he asks about what's going on. Kids always know more than we think they do. Over the next several months, Jacob grew weaker and weaker. When he came home from the hospital, he could walk with assistance until he couldn't. His mother would carry him to the couch where he would play video games and watch movies on his iPad until he couldn't. She never left me alone with Jacob, fearful I would introduce the idea of dying. I assured her I would never do that without her permission. Excuse me. But she always hovered nearby. Jacob answered my questions with superficial answers, seeming to know instinctively what his mother wanted to hear. I didn't have a chance to develop a closer relationship with him because his mother inserted herself into every conversation, speaking for Jacob to keep my visits short. She did the same with our nurses. By the time of my last visit, Jacob was paralyzed from the neck down and needed his mother nearby even to scratch his nose. His voice became shakier and softer until he could hardly speak. Now all he could do was watch movies on his iPad all day long. The change in his voice alarmed me. I was afraid he would suffocate at the end of life as his tumor infiltrated the brainstem's breathing center. I was afraid his death would be unnecessarily traumatic. And still, his parents could not bring themselves to tell him he was dying. "I'm afraid it'll make him sad," his mother said. I looked back at Jacob on the couch as his mother and I talked in the entry hall. What do you imagine Jacob is thinking now that he can't move? Does he ever ask? No, she said, he doesn't ask. He used to ask when we were going to go back to clinic, but he doesn't ask anymore. That's because he knows already, I thought to myself. She tried to hold back her tears. Sometimes he wakes up at night crying, but he says he's just having a bad dream. I just can't tell him. I stood there in the entryway, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, one hand on the doorknob, feeling the pressure to get this right. You know, I remember taking care of a child one time whose mother talked with her about her death in such an amazing, gentle way. I went on to explain how the mother told her daughter that life is like a marathon, a very long race. She told the little girl that she, the child, would finish the race before her parents or sister, and that when she got to the finish line, she should just wait there for her family because they would join her soon, and then they'd all be together again. I found this mom's explanation so comforting myself. I wonder if something similar would be helpful for Jacob. She nodded tearfully, but said nothing. I was under no illusion that I had given her the courage to introduce the topic. I know this is hard for you. I can understand how sad it will be for you and your husband to have this conversation. And I'm sure he'll be sad to think about leaving you, but he needs you to be at your strongest now. He needs to know the truth so you can answer his questions and calm his fears. I tried not to let my irritation show. Our social worker brought books and scripts that other families had used, guidelines for helping the couple talk to Jacob. Carol offered to help the parents plan and practice a conversation about death, but they never told Jacob what was happening. How lonely and isolated he must have felt, and scared. I wondered what he thought about when the house was quiet at nighttime. I wonder if he ever had visions of family members who had died before. I wonder if he ever had dreams that gave him comfort, floating on a cloud, running and playing again. Of course he knew what was happening to his body, but he also knew that his parents were not open to talking about it. I was so sad for Jacob. His story has haunted me for several years now. I feel like I failed him. I should have been able to guide his parents more effectively. I should have been more persistent, more persuasive. I should have been a better guide. But what else could I have said? I wondered if they told Jacob how much they loved him every day. Or is it possible that they held back on telling him how much they loved him to keep him from guessing that he was dying? And now, years later, do they harbor any regrets about what they said or didn't say? I think about Jacob every time a parent tells me they don't want to talk with their child about death. I don't accept the excuse of waiting for miracles or praying for the cure. I don't accept the excuse of not wanting to take away hope, because miracles, prayers, and hope can coexist with truth-telling for dying children. Every time the issue comes up, I tell them that the child always knows what is happening to their body, that not telling them creates a distance between parents and child at the very time when the child needs their love and support the most. I push harder for Jacob. So I hope I've convinced you that many people around us, many people living close to us, are carrying a heavy, heavy load. And the only antidote to that is kindness and empathy. So it was these stories that really motivated my writing journey, made me want to start writing and learn to write. I had written academic papers, but I wanted to give a full voice to the stories that I saw. So my initial preparation was to apply for the Master of Liberal Studies program at Rice, which I did from 2015 to 2019. And I took a number of writing courses, especially in creative nonfiction. I am not a poet. I know a lot of poets. I love poetry, but I'm not a poet. And then for my capstone project for that degree, I came up with 150 pages of hospice stories and poems. and I gave an oral presentation. And at the end of that, I thought, I'm done. I'm finished. I got this. I'm going to take it to Kinko's and have them put together, 50 copies of this to give out to my friends, and I'm done. And about 6 months later, I looked through it and said, oh no, this really sucks. I've got to work on my craft some more. This is awful. And so I jumped back in. I wanted to improve my craft. And so at that point, I applied for a low residency Master's of Fine Arts from Vermont College of Fine Arts program. And obviously, it would have been easier to do that in Houston, Texas, at the University of Houston, which has a wonderful writing program, but they don't have a part-time program. You have to be a full-in graduate student to go to U of H. And at that time, they also did not have a creative nonfiction specialty. So I enrolled at Vermont College. And when I was accepted, one of my professors called me and said, we're so excited you're going to come here. Your writing is already strong. You know how to write a sentence and a paragraph, but no one is going to want to read these stories. No one is going to care about these patients unless they know what Nancy is going through. You have to be in these stories. And Nancy, the introvert, ate a big hole out of her computer and said, I can't do that. And she said, we'll help you. We'll teach you. So I did 4 semesters with 4 different faculty members and learned to include myself in these stories. And it was really hard because I thought I was going to be looking down on these scenes and describing them, but I had to learn to be in the stories without feeling that I was taking the precedent role, which I did not want to do. So my creative thesis after this master's was 200 plus pages of hospice stories, much, much better than what I had done in my first round. And then we go to sort of step 3. I needed to work on getting the book put together because what I had before was 200 pages of essays. Some people had seen some of them, other faculty had seen different ones. It was not a cohesive manuscript. And so I had to figure out how to make it cohesive. So that was task 1. Task 2 was to get some of the essays published. And that's sort of like the equivalent of peer review. If agents and publishers see that you have gotten essays published, it indicates that others have seen your work and found it worthy, even if it's not as great as it could be. So to date, I think I've had 14 of these essays published in various literary journals. I did a postgraduate semester just last semester with one of the 4 people I had worked with before, and I sent him the entire document in one big lump, which by that time was even bigger, about 300 pages. And I asked him to read it all the way through, to skim it all the way through so he could give me some ideas about structure and form. And I had put together an order for the essays. And then he went back at the beginning and did, 75 pages of line editing every month. So basically, we did get through it. It now has a true structure. The 300 pages of essays includes some periodic, what we're currently calling interludes, that are sort of expository in nature. How I got into hospice medicine, what a hospice team does, what do I do to take care of myself on some of these really awful days, explaining a little bit more about this kind of work. So I am now doing the final editing of those essays. And I have found a couple of challenges, even in these essays, that I'm still sort of grappling with. One is that every time I try to put an element of humor in these essays, a little bit of sarcasm, a little bit of cynicism, a little humor, even though it's never aimed at my families, it's always aimed at the system and the frustrations with the system. My readers say, take it out, take it out. So I'm struggling to figure out how to incorporate a little bit of humor here. Some of the deaths that I had were fairly traumatic, and I do want to tell those, but I have to do it in a sensitive way. I also still struggle a little bit with endings. I can be sort of preachy, and I don't want to have a preachy ending, but not every ending also needs, 2 pages of reflection either. I have to figure out how to balance putting this story into a larger framework without, beating people on the head of it. And I may want to add a few more stories, maybe some short scenes, just some powerful settings that I saw. And then the other issue is that it's much more difficult to write about privileged patients. Trust me when I say that the sorrow and grief and loss are the same, but they are not accompanied by food insecurity or job loss or anything else. It's very difficult to disguise those patients. People who live in our wealthiest neighborhoods or suburbs, people who have donated millions of dollars to study their child's disease. That's a hard story to tell. It's a hard story to write. And I have some ideas about writing about their children's legacy, in the sense that their parents have dedicated considerable resources to making it so that other families don't suffer as they have. But I'm not sure about that. And to be honest, most of these families have the education and the connections to tell their stories themselves. They may not need me to shine a light on their stories in the same way that my marginalized patients, I feel, need that. So those are some of the things that I'm still sort of tangling with. The manuscript will go out on submission no later than September 1. And I very much need you guys to hold me to that. I really need that, because otherwise I'll think of 1,000 other things to do. I am doing other writing. I'm very interested in flash memoir pieces. Flash is hard to write, really short and potent pieces. I'm working on a piece that I shared last week with my writing group that may turn into one of those pieces. I've done some food writing. I got a paper, an essay about asparagus accepted in a journal. So, there's no limits. But I am enjoying doing some of those things. And for me, at least, when I'm stuck and not feeling like writing, opening a book of prompts and writing to whatever it is I find there is a good way to get unstuck. So I really enjoy doing that. And then the submission process itself is an important part of this. I mentioned it earlier. Why bother? The first piece I ever submitted was accepted. So that was a really bad start for me, because I think the next, 40 were not. So you have to get used to it. It's really important to pay attention to each journal's individual requirements. Some of them want a PDF, some want a Word document, some require your name on it, some say don't have any identifying information, just pay attention. And I put this up here to avoid writer's relief. It's a company that if you start submitting things, they will be putting ads all over your Facebook page. It's a company that allegedly helps you prepare your pieces for submission, and then gives you 25 or 30 places to send them. And I found that it was way overpriced for the value, and they were having me send my work to a junior college student newspaper, that kind of thing. And I mean, I wasn't trying to send it to the New Yorker, but I thought it probably deserved a little better. And then contest entries. I have a funny way of looking at contests. One is that if you win a contest, you might get a publication out of it. If you lose the contest, then you've basically made a donation to a journal. And so that's a nice thing. I won the first contest I ever entered, which was through the Writers League of Texas, one of my favorite organizations. And it was great because I got to have a conversation with an agent after I won. And I had a lovely conversation with her, and she had huge plans for my book. And she, I just send me the next 50 pages. And I mean, it went on and on and on. And I sent her those 50 pages and she ghosted me. I never heard another word. So anyway, but I did win the first contest, and that's a nice thing to be able to put on a resume. A couple of weeks ago, I was named the runner-up in another contest. That one was meaningful to me because it is a journal that's a high quality, and it is a journal that agents and publishers probably read. And so that might open up some additional doors. And I felt good because it was a hard, it was a really tough essay to write. I'd worked very hard on it. It was about a young adult who was homeless, who died homeless from heart failure. You do have to get comfortable with rejection. I looked it up in my little spreadsheet, and last year in 23, I submitted 64 pieces to journals and had 9 of them accepted. So that's an 86% rejection rate. You gotta get comfortable with it. At Vermont, we actually set an intention for how many nopes, how many negative responses we want to get in a year. And I aimed for 50 and I got 55 last year. So good for me. I got a lot. If you get enough nopes, you're going to get a couple of yeses as well. I think the whole business about preparing yourself for publishing is a whole different level of knowledge and education. I'm still working on that. I have been told by people in the business that this book, Before and After the Book Deal, is a really good book for walking you through the process. And I've put that here on the slide. Learn from others. Go to every free panel and free webinar that you can about the publishing process. You'll always learn something. And then have some sort of a plan and a backup. Obviously, like everybody else, I would like to go the traditional publishing route with an agent and a publisher. But I think that, if you, on face value, a collection of pediatric hospice stories in which everybody dies could be a tough sell, depending on how it's pitched, could be a tough sell. So I think my book could easily land with a small press or a university press instead, and that's okay. And then many people, of course, like to do hybrid publishing and self-publishing, but then you, the author, accept all of the financial risk of that. And I think one of the most important parts about being an early career writer or an early career author is to build yourself a writing community. And that means showing up and participating like this group, being here with this group, take community courses. I love nPrint courses. I've taken them from nPrint. I've taken them from Grackle and Grackle. Join a writing group, find people. I mean, I found Margot and Thelma and Claire and Andrea through a course that we took together, and we just clicked. And so for the last year, we've been writing together, and it's been wonderful. They correct me when I use medical words that I shouldn't use. They tell me how it reads to them, which is advice you can't pay for. Most of my other friends are doctors, and so how can I know unless people are honest with me with their feedback? I go to readings from imprint. I go to book launches, participate in reading groups. It's very important to try to be part of the community. And I would also say that it's also an opportunity to cheer on your friends. When somebody has a show or somebody gets an award, cheer for them. You never know how that kind of encouragement may really spur them to be more than they ever imagined for themselves. So be part of a writing community is one of the most important things, at least in my mind. And I have to hold myself accountable for my own writing practice. Writing groups are very helpful, but I decided when I finished my MFA and didn't have deadlines anymore that I would keep a daily log of my writing activities, which might include the essays I read today, the people I talked to, what I worked on, the revisions I made, those kinds of things. So I've kept that. And I keep that in my writing notebook. And then once a month, I summarize them in a letter to myself. Just like every month, I had to send my professors a letter saying what I had accomplished for the month. And I'm still doing that to hold myself accountable, to get my butt down in the chair and do the work. And then I think you also have to identify as a writer, create a resume for yourself, have cards made. If you want to be a writer, act like a writer. So that's my thing. And if it's not too late, I would like to read about a 4-minute piece. Is that okay, Marga? Okay. And this, I believe, is going to be, for obvious reasons, I think, the last essay in my collection. It's called The Call. One Saturday morning, I was walking the trails through the oak forest on our property, looking for the pair of pileated woodpeckers I could hear, furiously pounding their heads against a tree trunk. My phone rang with a similar rhythmic urgency in my pocket, as though in conversation with the woodpeckers. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and noticed an out-of-state number. Usually, those are spam calls. Usually, I ignore them. But on this morning, some deep, tingly feeling, a premonition, an intuition perhaps, compelled me to accept the call. It was Kim, the mother of a young adult, Aaron, who died in our hospice unit more than 5 years previously. She said she'd been thinking about me and decided to call. How brave of her to call. What emotional energy she must have expended to make that call, to take the chance I would remember her, that I would pick up the call. When I said, "Of course I remember you," I heard a soft snuffle on her end. As she brought me up to date on how she came to live in a neighboring state, I heard hints of family disruption and financial strain. She was no longer working for her longtime employers, 2 men who had been supportive and forgiving through the long grind of her son's lifelong illness. She wasn't very specific about the troubles she'd been through. I remember her sharing with me about her health challenges too, but I don't remember the details now. What I do remember were the threads of poverty, sorrow, and isolation running through her story. Her son Aaron was in his 20s when I met him, a young man with the intellectual and emotional age of a much younger child. He was about the size of a 10-year-old boy, but hunched over like an old man, with an unforgettable elfin face to match. Like many youths who've grown up in the hospital, Aaron had an outsized personality and a practiced banter from interacting with kind nurses and generations of medical residents. He was an entertainer. Kim and I laughed and shared stories about her son's zany personality, about his antics on our unit as his life ebbed, flirting with the nurses. I told Kim the blue beanie bear Aaron had given me still rides on the dashboard of my car, slumped over like Aaron, a memory, a talisman, my personal protector. Kim told me she wanted to express her gratitude again for how we had cared for the both of them. Right after he was transferred from the hospital to the hospice unit, I discovered the pair was homeless, staying in cheap motels during brief periods when Aaron was not in the hospital, keeping their possessions in a storage unit. His mother worked full-time, but she had missed a lot of work with his illness and couldn't keep up with rent payments. Somehow, she had felt safe back then, sharing with me they had no place to go if the hospice unit couldn't keep him until he passed. And somehow, I had found the words to build a trusting connection with the two of them. His specialist at the hospital had no idea the family was homeless, even after 20 years of caring for him. I've reflected a great deal on the experiences I had with this young man. His decline was slow and relentless, but while he could still get out of bed, he wandered the halls, stopped in to visit the nurses at the desk, and spent many languid hours out by the garden gazebo where his mother went to smoke. In the early evening hours, herons and egrets would land in the garden from the nearby bayou, looking for insects or crawdads, tiptoeing like ballerinas through the grass. I taught Aaron to recognize the differences between the big herons and the little ones, the egrets from the herons, the black-crowned from the yellow-crowned night herons. He learned their names and shared his observations with me about their behavior. His mother reminded me on the phone that on the last night of Aaron's life, a black-crowned night heron landed on the window ledge outside his room and stayed for a long time, looking intently into the room. A messenger? His ferryman? I'll never forget Aaron's memorial service, held in the chapel of a facility for disabled adults 50 miles outside the city. Neat cottages surrounded by live oaks and gently rolling hills. I remember the tales his friends and family members shared about the many kindnesses and special opportunities provided to Aaron in this rural community, how compassionate neighbors lifted him up and included him in local festivities. I remember the praying mantis that landed on my car door as soon as I parked, still there after the service ended, her forelimbs folded in benediction. No, I didn't forget this young man and his mother. It had been a privilege for me to walk alongside Aaron for his final mile. I could never forget them. Today's call was a powerful reminder that grief is never over. It's never done for parents who lose a child. Kim's sadness and longing may ebb and flow, but it never goes away. Today, the desperate need to talk with someone who remembered her son reared its head for this bereaved mom. Kim's call was a gift to me today, and I hope to her as well. As we ended our conversation, I asked her if she could feel my hug. And with that, I will stop and take any questions.
That is, if we're able to speak. Those are very powerful readings. So I have a question about, was there any typical length of time that these children were in hospice?
Yes, those who had long, slow, deteriorating conditions were sometimes on hospice over a year, but they were recertified as hospice eligible every 6 months. We had some children that came on service and died quickly. We had others that were on for a very long time. But in general, because of this provision that they can still see their doctors and be on hospice care, our lengths of stay were much longer than for adult hospice, which is traditionally, a week to 2 weeks.
And so you kept notes on each of your cases so that you could go back and
Yes, I have notes. I have a spreadsheet. I got yes, I have lots of notes.
Your comments about entering contests is very similar to what the visual artists go through as well. Yeah, you don't get accepted into all of them for sure.
Right. Yes, that's true for sure.
I love the photographs of the birds that went with your stories. Will your
Mhm.
book have any bird photographs of birds as well?
You know, I would love it if it did, but I don't know if I get the right editor. You know, those would need to be in color,
Mm.
so that might be a problem. But yes, and of course, I've given credit to them. Most of them are on a Facebook site called Birds of Texas. There's some amazing photographers there, but I'm friends with several of those, and for some of the really high quality ones, I would ask for their permission, obviously. But I like the bird pictures too.
I do, you made a comment about how you changed the way you wrote and how like you decided you needed to insert yourself into these stories. I think you did an excellent job of that.
Oh, thank you.
Being like the first that would, it's not hearsay, it's not you're hovering over. I just really liked how you did that.
Well, thank you. It was hard. I dragged kicking and screaming into it, but now I'm getting more comfortable with it.
Nancy, in terms of finding a publisher for your book, do any of the sort of the hospitals fund publishing of books?
I don't know. I guess it's always possible. But I'm probably going to, in the way that you find a publisher is find books that you like that might be
Right.
sort of similar to yours, and you look and see who their agent is. They always thank their agent in the foreword, and so you look and see who their agent is, who published it, and there are some online resources for that as well that you can look and see who's looking for essay collections. This is not really a memoir. I'm not going to sell it as a memoir. I'm not trying to. It's more of a collection of essays. So we'll see.
Can we stop sharing the screen so we can see one another?
Of course. How do I do that though?
There's a stop sharing at the top, I believe.
Yes.
And
Uh-oh.
I will, well, okay. And I will also remove your spotlight. So is that better?
Oh, there we all are. I think that would be a wonderful book for nursing students to read. Just as a marketing, I mean.
That's what I would think too.
There's a book out right. There's a book out right now that was written by a hospice nurse that has actually been very popular in the New York Times. I haven't read it yet, but yes, I think for pediatric nursing or for pediatric caregivers, I think this book could be important.
I read a book by a pediatrician who treated children with a lung disease. It was a beautiful book, and there was no happy ending on any of it, but it did win awards in a contest, and it was published. And I just can't remember. We had a recent move, so a lot of my books got misplaced, and I haven't found.
I think I met him. I think I met him at a meeting, and I read that book. It was well done. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think there is a market for death. I really do. I mean, something that we all have to deal with at some point. And children, do die.
Yep.
What is it you said? 70,000 a year. think
Yeah.
of how many people are affected by that. It's like, guns. People,
Yes.
how many people are affected by gun deaths? So,
Mhm. Yes. Yes. For
but
real.
you're inspiring. I loved all of the things that you have done. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Sherry.
I really appreciate how much detail you went into as far as how you kept the important information, the specific information confidential. I've been working at MD Anderson for 7 years with doing creative writing with pediatric patients.
Mhm.
And it's the most powerful stories I have to do with that work. And because of confidentiality, I never talk to anyone about it. And it's very isolated. And I think the tools that you've shared on how to tell these stories and honor confidentiality is just really important. And I just want to say thank you for how specific you got about that.
I'm happy to talk with you further about that if you would like. I actually gave my graduate lecture on protecting privacy and stories. So if you need more help on that, I'm happy to talk with you further.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Nancy, I really enjoyed your talk, and I really want to read your book. And I really want the audio version. I love your voice and how you tell the story. It's very moving, very,
Oh,
very.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I just felt so lucky to have that job. Really lucky to have that. I'm so glad I had that experience. It really was the purest form of medicine I ever practiced because I just took care of people. It was very nice. Well, thank you all for coming and staying. Really appreciate it. What else do I need to do, Margot?
Well,
Did
thank
I?
you.
You to stay.
I did want to mention, now that's, yeah, Patty mentioned it, about your voice. It really is lovely when you read your stories. And the pacing is just perfect. So, and
Well, thank you.
where can people contact you if they would like more information or to keep up with your
I will.
progress?
I have a website, but it's like blank. I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
Gmail.com. And I don't mind being contacted.
Great.
Oh yeah, happy
So
to.
you'll have a year's free membership. So that'll be
Cool.
awesome.
Cool. That'll be great. Awesome.
Yeah, our membership chair, I don't think she's joined, but she'll be getting in touch with you.
Great.
Melinda.
That's great.
Listen. So Brooke, I guess it goes back to you.
Yes. So, let's see. Before we allow members to share their news, we give Jean a chance to do a little plug for programs. So I'm going to pitch it over to you, Jean, and I'll take it back when you're done.
Unmute.
There you go.
Okay. Well, programs we've got coming up. Anne Lace is going to be next, let's see, not next month, but she's going to be August. We've got coming up, let's see, the other one is Brigitte Mongian, who is she's got the women's hiking group. She did the sculpture that's in Evelyn Park of the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. And she has recently done, I think she did a sculpture of Booker T. Washington that went up at that high school. And so she's pretty incredible sculptor. And she's also written a book on technology and art. So interesting person and interesting things to hear about. And Lace is written a book about Dewey's Cochran, and who was a doll maker, and really interesting doll maker. I sat and read over, and I read over your page, and then sort of I ordered the first book, though, the Holocaust book, the children's book. So Anne will be our August speaker. And that's about what I have. And then, of course, there's the ongoing wonderful Mosaic project, which is coming along slowly but surely. And eventually, not in the heat of summer, we will be installing it. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Jean.
You're
All right,
welcome.
so we have 25 minutes left before we close, which gives us plenty of time for members to share any announcements, any celebrations we want to make, we want to share. We can have a minute and a half each. Margot just demonstrated how you can put up your digital hand, as did Kathy. That puts us in order and doesn't rely on what part of the screen I'm looking at to call on people. So if you're able to do that, do that. If you can't figure that out, I will be watching for this. But let's go ahead and start with Margot.
Okay, great. I had a story accepted into Offscript, which is it's called Stories from the Heart of Medicine. And so I'm going to read a story about my CPAP machine. And it's an interesting process. You submit a piece. I think they do it maybe twice a year. And then they give you edits they want you to make. And then you go to a workshop for more edits, and then you read. So we will be reading on next Thursday at the Imprint House. I'm going to put it in the chat at 5:30. And it's interesting because my piece about, me and my pappy living with my CPAP machine, they wanted me to write it as a dating profile, which I've never done. I'm not familiar with that form. So I had to go online and find out what do you actually put into a dating profile. So there you go. That's me.
That's awesome, and some unique research you had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we have a workshop on that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Not that I need.
No, I'm not an expert. You need to have somebody who's actually tried it.
All right. And let's all say goodbye. Well, yeah, you're still there. Goodbye to Nancy. She just put in the chat that she needs to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Nancy.
Nancy. That was fabulous.
Wonderful presentation.
It was great being with you all. Thank you so much for the invitation and for your kind words. I really appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
Right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
Kathy, you are next.
Yes. Well, I wanted to let you all know that I just got an acceptance to publish a chapbook that I wrote called Consider the Light. And it's going to be published by Finishing Line Press. And I'm like triply excited, I guess, because the cover has been designed by Brooke. It's part of our collaboration. There is a poem in there that is just little double whammy on the collaboration. And then Melody's photo, Rest Stop, is in the collection. I also wrote a poem based on that photo in a ekphrastic workshop, which I think was sponsored by WIVLA.
Yep.
Yeah, with Lorette. Yeah. So I'm very excited. I don't have a date yet. I don't have any, I still haven't signed the contract, but I'm very excited.
Yay, congratulations. You're like full circle a couple times on WIVLA being entangled in this chapbook. Yeah. Donna, you are next.
Wrong button. And if I suddenly just drop off, I'm about to lose my any sort of juice in this machine. So there is in right now Houston, Print Houston 2024, and it's sort of a citywide celebration of prints. They tried to sort of form it a little bit after Photo Fest. And so a lot of galleries around town have print shows, and Archway Gallery has a print show, and I have 6 new prints up in there. And which framing is such a hassle. You know, but then 2 tomorrow night, if the creek don't rise, Margot and I will be at Archway Gallery. Yes, for the monthly Archway reading. Thank you.
Wonderful, and congratulations. Melody, you're up next.
I love how Zoom decides that your hand has been up long enough, and it just kept putting my hand in. Anyway.
I had you though up next, just so you know.
So there's probably a couple of us on this call that can talk to this, but I had a piece juried into the Lone Star Art Guild exhibition and got first place in professional photography. So I was real excited about that. I believe Shirley also got a second place and an honorable mention. She's off vacationing in someplace cooler, I think. And I have 3 pieces at the Jung Center group show till June 28th. And I think Pam, where's Pam? There you are. Pam probably wants to share something too.
Yes, go Pam. You have to hit the unmute.
Unmute yourself, Pam. In the lower right corner. Oh, she's on a phone. Let me see.
Tap the screen if you're on your phone.
Okay, so Pam, okay, Pam, did you get 3 ribbons, Pam? A second place, an honorable mention, and a first place? Is that right? You can nod, okay. 3 ribbons. Okay, I'm just not real good at this. You can put it in the chat if you want. But she's on a phone. Okay.
Yeah. Pam has much to celebrate from the Lone Star Art Guild. Let me just tell you.
Yeah. You'll have to, but you will send that information to Margot so she can put it in the newsletter.
Yeah. Pam sent me one image, but if you've got more, go ahead and send it, and also the text about your winnings, etc. Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, that's a good one right there.
Awesome. I don't see any more digital hands. Oh yeah, there's a real live one. Lane, you're up.
Well, hi. I told you guys last meeting or the meeting before that my little 10-year-old granddaughter had a piece of art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and tonight is the opening. We are not there. I wish we were, but I found out since then that there were 1,300 entries to this art show, and they picked 126.
Wow.
What an honor.
You should be so proud.
I am. I can hardly wait to get a picture of her in front of her artwork, but it hasn't been sent yet, so I'm just waiting.
That's exciting.
Is it in a certain area?
You mean it? Is there it's a show for school children in the city of New York.
Oh, okay.
So the pieces, I think the pieces were all submitted by art teachers. And they had grade levels, kindergarten through 12th grade competing.
And it's in New York.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Wow. Thanks for
Not
sharing
bad.
that, Lane.
How's that for something on your CV at that age?
Wow. All right, Susan. I know you don't have a camera, but please share your news.
Yeah, sorry for my lack of video presence tonight. I wanted to say hi to Pat Waddle. She's a new member and she's here with us tonight. So everybody say hello to Pat Waddle.
Hello, Pat.
I hope I'm saying your name right. But I also wanted to say that I just got accepted into a gallery in Galveston. It's called G. Lee. Some of you may be familiar with that gallery down there, but I'm really excited about having a wall in that gallery. And as far as I know, I'm the very first encaustic artist they have ever accepted into the gallery. So that's another really great thing for me to be able to show my encaustic work somewhere else other than Houston. So thank you.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Who else? Anyone else? Okay. Well, if no one else has anything else to share, then I will conclude us and just remind you all this is the 18th of June. You have 2 days to get your newsletter info to Margot so she can work her magic, and keep an eye out on it so you can be updated on all things wonderful going on that relate to WIVLA and member news that may even be outside of WIVLA. So watch for that, contribute to that, and contact us if you need anything in the meantime.
Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah.
So much excellent program.
Yeah, it was.
It was fabulous.
It was so good.
Thank you all. This is my first time here. And I love
Hey, you can speak. Hey,
there you are.
I found my
Figured it out.
I finally found the button.
Okay.
Yay.
What were the awards? What were the awards, Pam?
I don't know, but I was so excited because I entered 3 paintings and I won 4 awards and a cash award. One painting won 2. I don't know. It was like a first, a second, a best of, category, and then an honorable mention. I don't know. I was excited.
That's fantastic.
I guess. Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, and then really quickly, I was at a workshop last week, and the juror who picked my paintings in the original show at House was there at the workshop. So she was kind enough to give me her overview, critique, opinion on the paintings. But it was really fun to interact with her.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
And I just want to tie to Pat, who Susan introduced, because I met her when I joined the Houston Art Society and got involved in these things, and just want to give a shout out to how clear and well stewarded Pat is. I don't know how to say it. She stewards the process with such clarity. It was like the first competition that I ever or show like that, juried show that I had been in, and it was so easy. So I just wanted to give it a shout out to Pat for her work there as well, and give you a chance to say hi.
I don't see my picture, but I
We
have my
see
mic on.
Okay, you can see me, all right. Well, thank you for all the kind words. I forgot we were going to be on Zoom, so I didn't comb my hair or put on lipstick, but it looks like people are pretty casual, so I'm not going to worry about it. And Houston Art Society has a 71-year history, and we are about 100 strong, and we do 2 shows a year. And you don't have to be a member to compete. It saves you money if you're a member, but you don't have to be a member. And we are under the umbrella of the Lone Star Art Guild, and each league, which would be Houston Art Society, pays the dues for that. So it doesn't cost you anything to belong to the Lone Star Art Guild. And they have an annual show, usually in May or June. And anyone who has won ribbons in our shows or any league shows, there's leagues all around Texas, can enter the Lone Star Art Guild show. And their prizes are not as good as Houston Art Society because we give away $100 prizes, but you know, it's good for your CV, as Melody said. And Melody and Brooke are also members, and Pam is a member. So I'm happy that we women are getting together and supporting each other.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
Thank
I'm
you.
a member.
Who said that?
Jean.
Okay. Well, all right, Jean. I don't think I've met you at a meeting, though, have I?
No, you have not, because I haven't
Okay.
figured out where they are and when they are.
Okay.
I'm a recent joiner.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here with HAS.
Yep.
All right. Any more last minute celebrations? Okay. Well, you all enjoy the rest of your evening, and I look forward to the next time we get to see each other on screens or live in person at each other's events and readings and shows. So see you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.